DCI, a former DCI, went on an operation, found the Pakistani rape gangs operating outside a children's home in Bradford. He was dragged into a meeting where the council and the police in West Yorkshire threatened him with arrest if he continued. They covered up the gang rape of children. And if this plays through, politicians will be in prison and council officials will be in prison and police officers will be in prison.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's returning and still amazing guest is a man you should always be thinking of when people say to you, what's the point? What's the point of doing anything? Because you as an individual can't change anything. You as an individual are powerless. And what you say just goes into the wind and means nothing and changes nothing. Because this guest has been a voice in the wind, but over time, he's now changing things in his hometown of Oldham. People are listening to him. MPs are listening to him. Councils are now listening to him throughout the country because he's proving things that everybody else thought was untrue for decades and decades. And that guest today is Raja. Miah, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me. I always enjoy coming on and speaking with you. Last time I was in your house, but now I have my new computer set up, and my studio's nearly finished. And I'll get a backdrop like yours or something very soon. But that's a couple of weeks away, and the next credit card, I think, Nick. But I'm getting there. But yeah, I'm well, thank you. I'm well. Busy.
Yeah. Well, you will get there because, as you know, everything takes time. Because you've been on this journey now for 6 years, banging away at this, and this last few months, you're getting more and more attention now across the country, which is fantastic. Let's jump into this. What's going on with the rape gang inquiry?
Yeah, of course. So Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry, the crowdfunder finished. I think he ended up with just over 600,000. In the end, my personal thoughts are he increased the target to 1 million, and it was well on its way, and then it stuttered and stopped around 600, and it stopped when Maggie Oliver launched hers at the same time, and I think hers also stuttered and stopped around 150, 125 or something. It's a shame, really, Nick. My own personal reflections, because if they'd worked together, I think they would have got to 1 million, and then Rupert Lowe could have, ring fenced everything Maggie Oliver wanted. Maggie Oliver wanted, I think, 250,000, but he could have ring fenced 250,000. He would have got more. She would have got more. And this is a lesson for people on this journey of the importance of working together, Nick. And I'll keep saying this as someone who's fought on this on his own for such a long time. Every time someone came along and offered me help, I'm like, of course, please. We can only win if we work together on this. And this is what the inquiry is now currently up to. It's finished its fundraising, and it is now at the evidence submission. So they've set up a web page, and they're asking for people to submit evidence. Now, I know, and you know, Nick, that simply setting their web page up and asking for submissions and evidence, they're going to get very, very little back, if anything. I know that. So I've cleared my diary, Nick. There's a 2-week holiday coming up, not next week. There's a 1-week holiday for me. The week after, it's the Whit sort of holidays up where I live. So there's a week where I'm away with my daughter, and then all the way up to September, every day I am out, due to be scheduled traveling the country, going to location after location, speaking with counsellors, speaking with people, speaking with communities, and explaining to them what has took place. I put together these, what I call them, masterclasses. For me, it's been a challenge because I work very fast, Nick, and I don't really work in a way where things are flashy and nice in the background. I do something, it does its job, and I move on. And what I've realized is actually my content needs to be cleaner, sharper, all of that. I need to be able to present stuff. I used to have a team, Nick. I had a team that did all that. I haven't. So I'm learning how to do that myself. But the plan is I will be traveling around the country. Sammy Woodhouse is coming with me on some of these events. The plan is to get to at least all the 50 towns and cities where the rape gangs have known to have been operated. I've got a list. I've managed to get a list of who these places are, because you'll see they don't name the 50 places. They talk about at least 50. I was like, okay, where are the 50? And I'm someone who's worked on this for a long time. We're at the 50, so I managed to get a list, and we're trying to book venues. We're having some problems. There was a venue in Wales who've got back to the local campaigner there. We got local anchor points in all of these places, and they're struggling to book a venue because apparently it's far right extremism. You know,
Of course.
of course. So we'll navigate all of that. But so if people are here and if you would value me, just drop me a message, Nick. Please, if you share my email, share my contact details, please drop me a message. You'll find me on X. And people are forever surprised, Nick. I respond to people. Of course, I respond to people.
All your details will be in the description of this video.
Yeah, drop me a DM. Say, Raja, yesterday someone wanted me in Somerset. I committed to going to Somerset. I'm in Lancashire next week. So in some places I'm going into speaking to community groups, people who are interested but want to understand this better so they can articulate it better, navigate it better, avoid the far right allegations, so they understand it and they have the confidence and the capability to engage in this. And from that, you'll see, I believe, whistleblowers more than anything in terms of my specialism. I think those in the councils, those in the police who are told to cover it up. So there's a former policeman called John, who most recently I saw him on a video with the deputy home secretary, the shadow home secretary. And John came to me in January, really upset. He's from Oldham, came to me up, and I looked at him and I spoke with him, prepped him, sent him to GB News, and now his story is out, across the country. And that's my role. I'm that gateway of where I'll sit with you, support you, make you explain, support you to understand what to say and how to say it so you avoid those far right pitfalls. So you focus on actually what the important bit is rather than, some of the wider stuff where you can get lost in it. And now the entire country knows of how a detective chief inspector, a DCI, a former DCI, went on an operation, found the Pakistani rape gangs operating outside a children's home in Bradford. He was dragged into a meeting where the council and the police in West Yorkshire threatened him with arrest if he continued. Yeah, so these stories, there'll be hundreds of them, Nick. And my job, thousands. And my job is to go to the places where people can look me in the eye and say, Raja, help me. And I will help them get their stories out. We've got GB News. I've got Charlie Peters supporting me. He's been brilliant in this, and so we are winning. We are fighting back. I'm in Lancashire next Wednesday. I'm in Lancashire County Council next Wednesday. We're winning because also Reform won a series of local elections. When we last spoke, the elections hadn't happened, and they wiped the floor, haven't they, across the country, and they now control 10 councils. My plan is to get to all 10 of those councils and support those councils that Reform now control to say, you know what, we're going to pass a motion supporting a national inquiry. And secondly, if these county councils or if these councils are in the areas where we know the rape gangs operated, we're going to write to the Home Secretary saying we volunteer our localities for further scrutiny, because Yvette Cooper cannot find any council who will volunteer to be investigated. That's what's going on in the background. She can't find a single council who will volunteer to be investigated because they know they covered up the gang rape of children. And if this plays through, politicians will be in prison and council officials will be in prison and police officers will be in prison. So
is Lancashire Council potentially one of those areas?
Yeah, so Lancashire Council, it's like places like Pendle, Nelson, big Pakistani communities, the Lancashire County Council area, further up from, so it's Preston, so it's further up from Manchester, Oldham, Rochdale, but it's the M62 corridor. The rape gangs operated on the M62. Lancashire also historically included Blackburn. We know the rape gangs operated out of Blackburn. We know because the Shabir Ahmed, the Rochdale grooming gang, the court records prove that they were taking kids to these venues to be gang raped by men. So Lancashire County Council, I'm sure, I'm meeting with Reform next week. They've been in touch with me. I can't wait to get the next Wednesday. I'm meeting with them next Wednesday, and I'm sure they will pass a motion calling in the government for the entire jurisdiction covered by Lancashire County Council as volunteered to be one of the 5 inquiries. Now let's see what happens. Yeah, and we'll do that in all of the areas. We'll go everywhere else where reform, because sadly, we know Labour won't support this. We know the Conservative I mean, even the Keighley MP, Mr. Moore, he is struggling, isn't he? You know, he's shouting and screaming about Bradford being investigated, but the council in Bradford are controlled by Labour are blocking it, and that's a feature of our democracy. Sadly, they know crimes have been committed, but they're voting to block it, and they're actively voting to cover up. Well,
yeah, but don't forget, the Tories may be shouting about it today because it's politically convenient, but 14 years in power, they did nothing. So I'm sure they're shouting about it now, but Reform are different. Reform don't have their hands dirty on any of this. So if places like Lancashire or Durham, if they open a can of worms on this, they know it won't affect them because they're brand new. And maybe that's how we'll get to the truth.
And Reform, to their credit, they in the manifesto at the general election, the grooming gangs was referenced specifically. Yeah, to their credit, they were the only party that referenced the grooming gang. So claiming people are jumping on a bandwagon or anything, no, this was referenced in the manifesto last May. So it is clearly an issue for them and their supporters and in the communities that they represent. And we are not the far-right racists that these people have repeatedly tried to present as us. Reform have clearly a new party. They have an interest in this, and I will do my best, even though there are issues between people in the rape gang inquiry, between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage and Tyson and the others. On these issues transcend politics, don't they? You know, these issues. Yeah. So, for instance, yesterday, the Rupert Lowe put forward a motion, or puts forward something to do with Lucy Connolly. She's a political prisoner, isn't she? I think it's very clear to all of us what's gone on there.
3 years in jail for a tweet.
Yeah, that she deleted. Yeah, and the claim wasn't go and burn these places down. I don't care if there's a quantifier there. But that's by the by. What happened was Jeremy Corbyn signed and supported Rupert Lowe. There are issues, whatever whatever our political allegiances, there should be issues that we all agree on that transcend politics, or political differences on a personal level. And I believe the grooming gangs, the rape clans, are one of them. Sadly, the Conservatives did nothing for 14 years, and that will haunt them, and so it should. And all I say to my Conservative friends is, well, if you did nothing for 14 years, let me give you the benefit of the doubt. You didn't know how severe it was. You were too scared. You thought there were lies. Now you know. Prove yourself. Now you know, prove yourself. And the likes of Katie Lamb have done. She stood up in Parliament and swore, used words about F the white girls and F the government. This is what the Pakistani clans were doing whilst they were gang raping children. Those were the words they were uttering, and she repeated those words in Parliament. Robbie Moore is constantly, trying his best. And I look at that and I think, I can say you did nothing or you did nothing, but everyone who's done nothing, I say to everyone who's done nothing, including my former Labour Party colleagues, now you know the truth. Now is the time for, if not redemption, at least you can maybe look at yourself in the mirror again and say, you know what, I was wrong. I should have done something. And maybe if this doesn't put it right, it doesn't matter, but at least I've tried to do something.
Yeah, none of us can go back in time and correct our mistakes. But what you can do is be a different person from right this second onwards. That's the only thing you can do.
the first time I saw the protests in Rochdale, it was Tommy Robinson's lot, the EDL, in the angry EDL, and they did no one any favors, Nick, the way they protested. And they were outside Rochdale Town Hall. It was a Saturday. The police had surrounded them and they were trying to attack Muslim families who had nothing to do with it. And I looked at it and I thought, this is a far right conspiracy. They're just using this. And this is me. And look at the journey I've come on. My starting point was I didn't believe this. And now I know it to be true. And if I appear zealot on this, it's also very personal to me because I failed as a man who safeguards children for his living and protects communities from extremists and was considered good, at the forefront of this work in this country. This is extremism. The gang rape of white working class children, religiously justified, racially motivated, is extremism. It's textbook extremism. They targeted children. That's why the Queen put a medal on my chest, Nick. In my own town, in a neighboring town. And I will take that with me to my grave, wherever I go. And actually, at the beginning of this, I should have done more, but I didn't believe it. But now I do believe it, and I'm trying my best. And that's what I said to my friends in the Conservatives. We all make mistakes. We all maybe perhaps started off at this place not knowing the severity of what took place, but now we know.
We also need to understand as well that all of us were lied to for decades by the establishment, by all the mainstream press, by people we trusted, by different organizations, by different politicians. Everybody we were brought up to respect and to believe, and we thought they had our best interests at heart. Turned out all of them were lying to us. So we can't be too hard on ourselves because everything was against us. But it got to a point where we all knew this was going on, and then people started to change then.
And we will win. So I'm in Lancashire next week. I'm traveling the country for two reasons, really. One is to meet with councils to support them to pass motions and apply pressure nationally. And the second one is to hold workshops, masterclasses, and encourage people to come forward and tell their story. And this is how we will win.
There'll be thousands of people out there with a story. And what we need to do is ensure that they feel comfortable, protected, and needed for them to come forward and get over the hurdle of knowing they did wrong and that they should have done more, or that they were cowards, or that they were corrupted. We need to help them over those barriers, because all that matters now is their story and the truth. Because the more we get people like that coming forward, the more they then will name people above them. It was my chief inspector who told me to lie. It was a deputy chief executive officer at the council who told me to lie. And the more people we speak to, the higher we'll climb up the ladder until we get to some big people. Because that's what we want. We want the big people.
There are three things for me. There are three outcomes for me, three key outcomes. One is, of course, the Home Secretary has ordered the police to review every historical file. We'll submit an FOI, or we'll get an MP to submit an FOI on Commons letter-headed paper rather than me and you to do it, because it comes from a better place. So we'll get that done. Well, we will want to know of a breakdown of every police force, how many files they went and re-examined, because that will give us an exact number of how many cases the police were aware of. So we'll get to that truth, that way. Second, so we need to know the extent, I think is what I'm saying, first and foremost. Secondly, we need to make sure that the police are tasked with going and arresting as many members of these rape clans as possible at every tier. That's not just the groomers, it's not just the ones who traffic them, but also their entire customer base. And the way I've calculated this and worked through this from listening to the children who talk to me about 50 men a night. Andrew Norfolk died recently, in the Times journalist. In his obituary in the Sunday in the Times, there's a paragraph that talks about how he found out off the testimony of a child that she was gang raped by 50 men in one night. Now, what I'm saying to you is that's not an anomaly. That was standard. So it's 50 men, and I genuinely believe that there are tens of thousands of men in this country, predominantly of Pakistani heritage, who have gang raped children and paid the traffickers in the same way as the heroin traffic. Yeah. So they turned up, lined up in hotel rooms, lined up outside takeaways, tens of thousands of men. Well, I want every one of those men identified, and I want every one of those men convicted. You know? So first and foremost, that's where we've got to go to. Not a few symbolic cases. There you go. No. The evidence clearly shows that these children were gang raped by tens of thousands of men. Just put that into context. Tens of thousands of men. And the second thing clearly is those who were responsible for failing to intervene, not just at an operational level, but those who ordered investigations shut down or tried to suppress people who were speaking out. And that includes some of the most senior politicians in this country. I want them prosecuted. And if the government won't prosecute them, then it's down to Maggie Oliver and her they knew. That's the premise of her entire campaign. And this, I promise you, Nick, if Maggie Oliver and her campaign don't go after some of the most senior politicians in this town that we know that they knew, and I'm not saying they knew and did nothing, they knew and covered it up. There's a difference between knowing and doing nothing and knowing and actively covering up. I mean, there's a line there for me. Both is wrong, but there's another line that they've crossed. I want every one of those politicians prosecuted. I don't think I'm alone in that. I don't think the nation will be alone in that. And we will see what Maggie Oliver does. And if Maggie Oliver doesn't go after the likes of Jim McMahon, Angela Rayner,
Burnham,
and Andy Burnham, if she doesn't, then we will launch our own crowdfunder to take out private prosecutions against the Greater Manchester Mayor, against the Secretary of State for Local Government, and against the Deputy Prime Minister. And I'm saying this to you with all seriousness. People say, well, what's he going to do? Well, what have we already done, Nick? What a group of working class men, women from a small northern town have already done. When we came to this fight, we knew this fight would define the future of this nation. This is a national shame. It's a national scandal. And the politicians at the top who are complicit in this have got to be prosecuted. And if we'll learn from what Maggie Oliver does, and if she goes after them, great, we'll support her. If she doesn't go after them, we'll look at to see what our legal team does, what success our legal team has, and then we will use that as a stepping stone, launch our own campaigns. And I won't launch a campaign called They Knew and leave it ambiguous. I will name this is a justice funder for a private prosecution against the Greater Manchester Mayor for his role in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of children. This is a crowdfunding campaign for a private prosecution against Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. I'll do it just like that. You know what they're going to do? Lock me up. Lock me up, and so what? What difference will it make? It just makes us stronger.
Yeah. I mean, your final point there is where I think is the most important point. It's the politicians, it's the senior council staff, it's the senior police officers. If we can prosecute some of them, not only does that potentially end the grooming gang scandal, because then not future grooming gang victims, because everybody then knows this will be investigated, never covered up again. It has an extra benefit, which means many of our future scandals that have nothing to do with grooming, other scandals that may be coming down the path, won't happen because people then realize I'll be held accountable.
No one is above the law. No one is above.
But they are at the moment, Raj.
They are at the moment, but no one should be above the law.
And that's where we need to get to. I commented on an Andy Burnham tweet the other day because he really annoyed me. I don't follow Andy Burnham because he just annoys me. But one of his tweets popped up on my timeline, and it was about former servicemen in the army in this country from years ago who have been affected by radiation because of the testing of nuclear bombs and stuff like that. And that's very serious. And we've let those people down as well. But he jumps on the bandwagon of it by saying, I support this. We need a national inquiry. We need to pay compensation because this might be the biggest scandal ever in our history. And I went, I'm not having a last line here. I'm not having this. So I commented saying, Andy Burnham, you're the police crime commissioner. If you wanted tomorrow, you could start a proper investigation into the grooming gangs in Greater Manchester, not the assurance review that you commissioned a few years ago. You could do this today. You could go down in history as the politician who finally blew the lid off the grooming gang scandals and got people arrested and stopped it forever and changed this country for the better. You're a senior politician with the power. You could change this country. You would go down in the history books as a hero, but you don't. I know they don't tweet at him, but I just had enough that day. He jumps on bandwagon after bandwagon after bandwagon.
Well, he's lying about the rape gang and his role. I had it out with him on X. He responded, then he ran away. You know, I said, "I'll meet you. You're the politician, mate. I'm just a working class bloke. I'll meet you at the time and place. Tell me, put the cameras there, get an audience there. You're the one who's been trained on how to publicly speak and all the rest of it. Whatever training I've had is actually from working in the field. So let's have it out. Truth is on my side, and I will demonstrate to people how you, as in Andy Burnham, launched a series of assurance reviews that was never about getting the truth. It was about managing the truth. And you are part of the cover-up. And I'll also prove that there's something called Operation Hexagon. You're the police and crime commissioner. The police should never have been allowed to launch Operation Hexagon, which went after me and the members of my town who spoke out against the grooming gangs. That is something from the Stasi. Should not happen in our country. And he won't engage on those issues because he knows he's wrong. And when you follow it through, Nick, and I know it's personal, but it is personal. I have been repeatedly arrested. Greater Manchester Police have fabricated evidence to try and have me convicted. The CPS were involved, and there is an injustice there because why have you had me arrested? I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a criminal. I've not even got speeding points on my driving license. I don't park anywhere where there's a parking. Now I've got no parking tickets. Why? Because you wanted me silenced on speaking out on behalf of children who've been gang raped. This is wrong.
And every time you've been arrested, it's been kicked out of court.
Yeah, dragged me, marched me out in my underwear, dawn raided my house repeatedly, put me in prison cells, humiliate me, write stories about me. I don't think they quite understand, Nick. I'm past all of that. I walk the streets of my town. I'm on a train to London today for an interview tomorrow with is it Winston Marshall, the Mumford and Son lad. Now
I interviewed him a couple of years ago before he got too big.
No, he's been chasing me up for a while, and I'm looking forward to speaking to him because I think he's been on his own journey. But I hold my head up high because I know I've done the right thing, and I've spoken out and I've campaigned, and I'll continue to campaign. So those are two things. One is we need to know how many and get them arrested. We need to get those who are responsible arrested and convicted, irrespective of how they go, particularly those involved in the cover-up. And finally, there's got to be a compensation scheme for the survivors. A former leader of my town, Amanda Chadderton, who we campaigned against and got rid of, and went and worked for Yvette Cooper, rewarded with a job for Yvette Cooper, stood in the council chamber and said, you can't say it destroyed their lives. I'm sorry. I've looked into the eyes of countless survivors. It has destroyed their lives. They need compensation. The state is responsible. And I say this.
Let me just jump in there, Roger. Just to clarify, Amanda Chadderton, she said that in direct reference and direct regard to the grooming gang survivors. That wasn't just a one-off comment she made. She was actually answering a question put to her, and she basically said the victims of the grooming gangs, you can't say being gang rapes ruined their lives. That's in the context of how she said.
Can't say it destroyed their lives in the context of a council meeting where we'd forced a vote for a public inquiry, to call in the government. So they voted down calling in the government, and her defense for voting down calling in the government was now no longer whether it was a cover up or not, or whether it had happened or not, because the public gallery was full of survivors who can be heard screaming at her. There's no need to call in the government because you can't say it destroyed their lives. So this woman, we get rid of her. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, gives her a job. So my point, nice, yeah. So my position, my third and final sort of position on this is, one, we go after those who did it. Two, we don't go after those who covered it up. And third, the justice for these survivors is, sorry, it did destroy their lives. I've met countless number of young women whose lives it has destroyed. And there needs to be a mandatory compensation scheme in the style of Windrush, in the style of what they're doing in Northern Ireland to the survivors of Vista. And why won't our government do it? Well, the 20 recommendations that they keep going on about ICSA, the one they've dropped is to deal with compensation.
And do you know why they've dropped it?
So they can't afford it.
They can't afford it because there was that many girls being gang raped. So many decades ago, the answer from Labour would have been, there is no girls being gang raped. It's a far-right narrative. Then it changed to, there may have been some girls who may have been abused, but those girls were tarts anyway. Then it was, well, you may have found some girls who weren't tarts, but they were such a small minority. Now there's that many girls, we can't afford to pay them compensation. Things have changed a lot.
Yeah. And it's an official Home Office documents release sneaked out. So next time a Labour councillor or a Labour MP goes on about ICSA, and we know ICSA was a whitewash, but even then, one of his 20 recommendations, two of them they've dropped. One was to extend the time limit for the compensation, and the second one was the compensation itself. They dropped the time limit, and now they've dropped the compensation.
Oh, Labour, we both know Labour's going to do nothing about this.
We're going to get them out at the next general election. We're going to, and this is why, no matter what people say to me, I'm supporting reform. And if anything, they will realign the Conservatives to be more conservatives and rediscover some of their conservative views and values and what they once were. So actually, reform will support the Conservatives to be a better Conservative party, and we will go and take our country back, and we will get rid of Labour. This is the end of Labour.
I think it possibly could be, especially if we ever get an investigation. When it comes out the truth, that could be. I don't mean the end of the Labour government. I mean the end of the political party called the Labour Party. Could be the end of them.
I think so. This is a party whose most senior politicians are involved in the cover-up of the gang rape of children. As a policy, these aren't individual actions. This was the policy of the Labour Party. The exchange of children for votes under the term maintaining community relations.
Depressing, shocking, but we've known about it for a long time. Me and you, other people are beginning to understand what went on, and it's down to people like you, down to the people we know who have been fighting this for decades and decades, who have kept it alive when everybody else wanted it to die, wanted this issue to die out of public consciousness, but people wouldn't let it die. And look at where we are now. We're a few steps away from victory, a few steps away from holding people to account, and it can't come soon enough.
No, and I say to people, Roger, how much longer? I'll be honest, I think 6 more years. I'll be honest, I think 6 more years. We need 4 years up to the general election. And then once the general election comes and we're in power, or we've got a party in power who's alike with us, 18 months to 2 years for all the truth to come out, and you will see politicians in the dark prosecuted and put in prison for what they did.
Well, Roger, I'm going to hold you to that, because that's a great place to end this podcast, because that's a depressing, but it's a high note as well. It's depressing high note. If we can get some serious politicians in jail for covering up, I will die on my deathbed a happy man if we can achieve that.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
And everybody watching, go in the description of the video. All of Raja's details are there. Make sure you follow him. Make sure you subscribe to his channels. And Raja, let's catch up again very soon.
Thank you, Nick. You take care.
Bye-bye.